I have with me today Colin Thompson, a local member of the Dagorhir community who makes most of the armor for them. Colin, do you want to tell us about how you go about that?
Sure. On the Dagorhir field, we actually have multiple types of armors, some of them historical, and some of them fantasy-based. For example, the most common type of armor that we have on our field is leather. Historically, leather was never really used, as armor you would wear on your arms or legs or something to really actually protect your body. It was usually used as a harness to that you would put plate over, make it more comfortable.
But I've seen a lot of movies where there's leather everywhere.
Absolutely. One of the things about leather is it's really easy to decorate, and it can be hardened to, have the same appearance as steel armor. And as a result, a lot of fantasy films have taken that leather armor and, made it a part of their world and a part of all these video games like World of Warcraft and whatever. And in that way, it's grown really popular, but also so is the misconception that it was used as, anything more than really padding, to be honest. But as such, because our game is a bit of a fantasy game, I do end up having to make leather armor sometimes. Usually what you do is you go out and you buy what's called vegetable tanned leather, which means it accepts dyes and it accepts water hardening a lot easier than say chrome tanned leather. And you gotta make sure it's the right thickness. You gotta make sure it's at least 12 ounces, which is very thick leather. And you shape it, you carve it, you dye it, and you water harden it, and you get into the shape of armor, and you rivet it all together, and there you go.
So to shape leather, you have to get it wet? I thought that's how you ruined leather.
It depends on what you're wanting to do exactly. What water does to leather is it misshapes leather. It deforms it. So your jacket, it would get wrinkly, it would kind of crust up, it would get hard. But this is kind of sort of a thing that you want with armor. You want it to get harder, you want it to be able to shape it. And so when you dunk the leather piece into the water, the leather will soak in all the water, which allows you to mold it, and then as it dries, it'll dry in the shape of whatever form you had molded it in, which honestly, it holds shapes very well. You usually don't have to even have anything holding it or supporting it. You can just shape it with your hand and it'll keep the shape until it's dry.
All right, so if you've just destroyed all my dreams by telling me that leather armor wasn't real, what do you make that is historically accurate?
Just about everything else.
What's the most common one?
The most common one would be chainmail. Chainmail is usually wire that's been made into small rings, usually like 3/8 inch thick, and they're woven into a pattern to make a full shirt. And this was usually worn to protect against slices and that sort of thing from a sword or a short sword or anything like that. And it's one of the more common ones because it covers a large area on your body. And it's one of the more common armors on the field because in our game, armor actually gives you an extra point to wherever it's covering. And so if you can buy one piece of chainmail that goes all the way down your arms and possibly halfway down your legs and covers all of your chest, that's 5 different locations that are now covered by armor, all from this one purchase. And usually it costs about the same as buying an artisan piece of leather armor, or the next step up, lamellar, or the step after that, plate.
Now, lamellar, I've never heard of that before. What is that?
That makes sense. Lamellar is not very common in Western Europe. It's typically worn. It was sort of worn in Russia a little bit, but it was typically worn in Asia and the Middle Eastern areas. Basically, it's little plates that are usually about 2 inches tall by 1 inch wide, and they're all strapped together to form basically a jacket or a vest of protective armor. And what makes it common on the Dagorhir field is the fact that it can be made out of smaller plates. And so naturally, you can take scraps from larger projects, whether it be leather, because you can make leather lamellar, or if you're making plate, you can take the scraps from that and make steel lamellar. Just lace all these small plates together and you have full, historically accurate armor.
Now, that sounds good, but running around in a shirt made out of chainmail with another shirt of leather and steel plates on it sounds like a good way to die of heat stroke.
It all depends on what you're wearing underneath. It also depends on not doing it in 105 degrees in Arkansas when the humidity, makes you beg for air because your gills haven't quite come out yet.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Because the Western Hemisphere didn't have the same atmosphere as we do here. But however, it does rely a lot on what you wear. You want to wear period materials, particularly linen. Linen breathes wonderfully, and so you would wear that under it. It would breathe a lot better than cotton, especially under all that armor.
Well, where can we go buy linen shirts?
Unfortunately, you can't really buy linen shirts unless you buy them from specialty vendors. Linen, usually in the sort that you want to wear for our game, would be a tunic. And a tunic, which you could buy, as I said, from a specialty vendor, or you could buy the raw material from somewhere like Hancock's or Joann Fabrics, and you could learn to sew a tunic on your own.
Well, this is all very eye-opening, but we gotta talk about the one that everyone knows about.
Oh, yes.
What can you tell me about the full plate, the knight in shining armor, the most idealized, iconic armor in the world?
Plate armor. Plate armor is what everybody wants to see and what everybody wants to wear. Plate armor makes you feel like a badass. Plate armor has so many misconceptions about it, though. One of the most common being that it's hard to move in. The thing about it, though, is that historically, armor was usually made, or at least armor that you drop that much money on, money that would be probably could buy you 2 or 3 farms, the armor was usually made to fit specifically you. It was absolutely custom tailored to fit you so that you could have full entire range of motion. There's actually a very common myth out there that a knight who's knocked off his horse cannot get up. They've actually proven it. You can get knocked right up and you can stand right back up and start fighting immediately. You can roll around, you could, if you really wanted to, do somersaults or whatever, but
And I'm going to guess, do you make that? That seems like a fairly high maintenance item.
it is very hard to make. It takes a lot of skill to make. I would love to start on it soon. I know how it's done, which is usually done by nowadays at least, buying a large sheet of metal, whether it be mild, galvanized, or stainless steel. And then from there, actually working it much the same way you would the leather. It just takes a few more tools, heavier duty tools, obviously, to be able to cut it out. And then instead of shaping the pieces with water, of course, you would shape it in maybe a shot bag or a dishing stump, which is just a stump with a curvature in it. And you hammer it out, and then you use what's called a planishing hammer, which gives it a smooth looking finish on the end. And there you go. You have a piece of steel armor.
I think I'll leave stuff like that to y'all. I don't have that much free time or skill, but I'd like to thank you for coming by today,
Thank you.
and good luck making things that stop people from getting hurt.
I'll try.